Welcome to the Great Loop Radio podcast, brought to you by America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. We're dedicated to sharing Great Loop information and inspiration with those actively cruising, planning for, or dreaming about a Great Loop adventure. I'm Kim Russo. I'm the director of AGLCA. Today, we're going to do kind of part 2 of our Looper Lore episode. We did one a few weeks ago with Jackie and Sally Bentley. It was a lot of fun. But today we're kind of flipping that, and we're going to do Looper myths, and we're going to bust those myths, which I think is a great idea. And Kim Fleer and Ted Hingst will be with us in just a moment. We'll bring them into the conversation after I recognize and thank our Admiral sponsors who support AGLCA at the highest level. They are Edward Jones Financial Advisor and Certified Financial Planner Kathy All, Great Loop Yacht Sales, Passage Maker Trawler Fest, Skipper Bob Publications, and Waterway Guide Media. As always, we encourage our listeners and viewers to support these businesses that support the Great Loop. And so now I would like to very officially welcome Ted and Kim. They are aboard Pony. They are gold loopers who are coming to us where it is not yet boating season, so they're not on their boat today. But Ted and Kim, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Kim, thanks for having us on. We're glad to be here with you.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Let's start off, kind of tell us a little bit about yourselves and your Great Loop.
Okay.
Well, I've been boating up in northern Michigan for really most of my life. Kim and I met in 2018. I had just purchased a Ranger 31 tug, which I was planning to go on the loop by myself, but she had other ideas, which worked out very well for us.
Yeah.
And we left Petoskey, Michigan, our home port, late September 22 and returned September 23.
Yeah. Actually, the boat is on the hard in Harbor Springs
right now,
and
in a storage barn.
We splashed Pony on June 9th. Pretty short season up there for northern Michigan, top of the mitten, but we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, and I know you also have some big plans for this coming boating season. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, well, on our loop, well, we're familiar with boating on Lake Michigan, and Ted's boated a lot in the North Channel and Georgian Bay. On our loop, we did Lake Ontario a little bit, and Georgian Bay and North Channel. Last summer, we did Lake Huron and Lake Erie. So this summer, we are boating on Lake Superior to complete our 5 Great Lakes. So we're going to boat up through the Sault Ste. Marie Canal and go the South Shore to Duluth to see our friends Kim and John on kayak where they live. And then there's
who are gold loopers that we in Florida, Clearwater,
Tarpon Springs, yeah, and
began a friendship with them there.
Yeah, and so we're going to go see them, and there's really not a whole lot on the northern side of Lake Superior, so we'll head back the South Shore again on the way home. Should be a short cruise, but we'll get our homes certification.
Yeah,
all for the Great Lakes.
Absolutely.
And we're talking about more cruising. I don't know if we'll do a full loop, but we may end up boating east and then south and then down to Florida for a winter and then back home again sometime in the future. So
yeah. All good stuff. Well, I know when we did the first episode on Looper Lore, I had put out in our forum looking for, people to give us some of those adages that are, kind of funny, but very true when it comes to loopers. And you sent me a bunch of things that were more like looper myths. And I think you actually said when I said, would you like to do a version on that? And you said, well, bust those myths or something along that line. And Mythbusters is such a great show. So I thought, so let's go ahead and start busting some of those myths. So a few of them have to do with Lake Michigan, and that's your home water. So let's kind of start there. One that still floats around that you have to be off of Lake Michigan by Labor Day. Tell us why that's really a myth and not at all true for loopers.
I'll start this one just by, saying we got up to Petoskey ready to do the loop, and we didn't get started till September 30th. So that month waiting up there was getting a little nerve-wracking, and right about that time, I think Foster Schucker's podcast on busting the myth of getting off Lake Michigan before Labor Day came out. And I listened to it and it was so reassuring because based on statistics, you really have till mid-October or so, I think he said, but you have more bad days than good days getting into October like that, but you still have good days. You just have to watch the weather. And that was so reassuring to me, to know that we weren't going to have to skip starting the loop because we were running a little late. So, so that was reassuring. And really, we started September 30th and we did luck out. We had a gorgeous week. And since it's our home territory, we hustled down Lake Michigan and made it to Chicago. But I know the people who were up in Charlevoix and Petoskey at that time while we were waiting out a couple weeks of really nasty windy weather. So we just lucked out. By the time we were ready to start, we had a gorgeous week down Lake Michigan. So
Excellent.
We lucked out there. The other thing, Kim, is that going down the Lake Michigan side, you have the advantage of Department of Natural Resources and their affiliated marinas. And you hit October 1st, and a lot that reservation system with the Michigan DNR closes down. And so it makes it a little harder to plan ahead. Places are still open. You can still find,
still call ahead,
places to dock. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
It's just not as easy as what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great advice. And I think, the fear there is the weather. And of course, the facilities are starting to close down. So it's nice to hear that you were leaving from pretty far on north on Lake Michigan, September 30th.
I can tell you, having spent a lot of time on Lake Michigan, you can have crummy days in June, July, August.
We called off a trip. We were over on Beaver Island. We were going to go to St. Ignace by Mackinac Island, and we called it off because it was just a washing machine out there, and that was midsummer. So then by the time we got over to the Petoskey side, things had calmed down, so we headed on. But we're the first people to say, if it's bad, don't go, because it can be bad.
That was also Kim's first cruise with me, and
and he's like,
she kept on the boat and stayed with me. So apparently she wasn't too terrified.
Yeah, no. I'm like,
yeah, well, after we finished Lake Michigan, I decided that Lake Michigan boaters are just a hardy lot because even what y'all were saying was a great day on Lake Michigan, I was feeling pretty queasy with my seasick issues, even on the good days. So yes, I was a big fan. I think we were in Charlevoix for 10 days or so because I was not wanting to leave until it was a calm day. And
I think we did do our loops at the same time because I was following your videos on our way down. So I do remember you headed over to Door County.
We did. And that's actually kind of another one of those myths. And it's another one that Foster Schucker has been pretty adamant about busting. And that is, the myth is there is nothing to see on the Wisconsin side of the lake. And, I think way back, I think that myth actually started Waterway Guide Skipper Bob book on the Great Loop. Skipper Bob, for whatever reason, really loved the Michigan side, and there's a lot to love.
Oh yeah.
But his book kind of recommended against going to the Wisconsin side. I had the pleasure. I was actually flattered that they asked me to edit that book to bring it current recently, so I put in the Wisconsin side because we did do the Wisconsin side. We absolutely loved it. Door County is very beautiful.
Door County is a gem.
I lived in Chicago area for, 20, 30 years, and Door County is a destination vacation for land lovers too. It's gorgeous.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So much to see and do there. We actually, and because of our time frame, because we had been in Charlevoix for so long, we ended up renting a car from Sturgeon Bay and really kind of explored Door County by car. But there's so many boating facilities and so many great small boating towns that if you can work that into your planning, it's a great option. I loved Milwaukee, such a great town. Sturgeon Bay was very boating friendly, and Milwaukee just was not, completely unexpected at how lovely Milwaukee was, how many good restaurants, what, the beautiful river walk, the beautiful architecture.
It's really an overlooked town for sure.
Really is, yeah.
I agree. So I'm thankful we did the Wisconsin side. I also think you can't go wrong with the Michigan side. And if we ever go around again, we will do the Michigan side so that we can have done both. But so it's one of those reasons you need to go around twice. It's a hard choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. To see the things that you miss.
Well, you'll have to stop into Petoskey so that we can take you around and show you the places we love in Michigan.
I would love that. You're going to have to show me where to find the rocks too.
Okay.
I was not familiar with the Petoskey rocks until I got to Petoskey. So
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
one of those things you learn on the way.
Yeah, that's and you know we've been plugging Petoskey for the last
Mhm.
couple of years too. So hopefully we see you there.
Yeah, absolutely. So this next one I love, and I don't know that this was one you submitted to me, Kim, and I don't know if I've ever heard it quite phrased this way. But you said, you know, the myth is that you need to make some grand proclamations, that you need to keep everyone informed of what you're doing by some grand pronouncements of the plan. How can that steer you wrong by putting all that out there?
Well, we like I said, we got up to Petoskey September 6th or 7th or something like that. And
With an idea that we would be underway by the 13th.
yeah. And we got up there, and this is on the heels of our dinghy was being shipped to the US, and it was stuck on a ship in the Pacific Ocean because of the strikes in California at the ports. But the strike ended, our dinghy landed, it was on its way to Chicago, and we said on
Oh my gosh, everything's coming together.
And then it didn't.
Mhm.
We had boat maintenance after boat maintenance. We did go down and get the dinghy. That went well, but there were so many other things that we had to do to get ready. And even the morning we're casting off, we're putting the Nebo link unit in, trying to get it hooked up so that we can go. I'm not sure we had that working until we got all the way around to Norfolk, but that's another story.
Yeah.
But you just cast off, you know,
And I think really what it is, it's about overconfidence.
overconfidence.
We got this handled now. Everything's going to be, you know, once we get around this bend in the river, we aren't going to have to deal with any more barges.
No more barges.
Once we get past this area, no more crab
No more-
pots.
And you know what? No more bad weather, because I can see sunshine up around that.
Yep.
And we kept saying that, and then we realized we are so off. that we said, no more of these grand
Pronouncements.
and we just learned to keep our mouth shut and just enjoy
Yep.
what we have.
You know,
because
what's going to come at you is what's going to come at you.
yeah.
And roll with it, and it'll be a lot more fun and a
Mhm.
lot less stressful.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost the Murphy's Law of boating, that by putting it out there for the universe, you're therefore
Yes,
destroying
yes.
your chances of that actually happening.
You're
Yeah.
tempting the fates.
Exactly. So the next one, the myth is we're planning a year-long trip. We've got to plan the whole year. So tell us, you know, where that sense comes from and why that myth is busted.
Yeah.
Wow.
That, you know, I do see a lot of angst on social media. I probably posted on the Facebook page, the Women of the Loop, and this, how do you provision for a whole year? Or how am I going to get all of my prescriptions for a whole year? Or what clothes
How
for a
are
whole
we
year?
going to know everywhere we want to stop this year?
Yeah, how do we plan this whole entire trip with stops and timeframes and everything for a whole year? And the fact of the matter is you don't. And was that yeah, we took a little weekend trip down to Leland. No, Northport. That was
Northport. We were in Northport.
And we were in Northport, and we saw another Ranger tug owner and struck up a conversation, and he was on his loop. And
He
he
was
said
on his second loop.
second loop.
He had looped during 2020.
Oh, that's right, the COVID year. So
Which he said was very interesting. Now they wanted to do it a second time when everything was open.
actually
Right.
open. But he told you, and this was what we just
Well,
lifted
I asked him, it's just, you know, I'm finding myself a little overwhelmed. I'm trying to think about how am I going to plan out this 5,000-mile, 12-month-long trip. And it's like, it was kind of like talking with Bob Creech.
Mhm.
He says, don't worry about it. He says, it's a series of 40 to 50-mile day trips.
and
Oh,
the
and then
pressure
all of a
was
sudden the
up.
pressure came off. It broke it down in my mind that Well, all I need to plan is, X number of days ahead. I don't have to plan a year ahead.
Yeah.
And
And
that is great advice. Some loopers are hardcore planners and really like to have the whole plan, and that's
Oh,
fine if
yeah,
it works for you, but when that's
Mhm.
adding
sure.
pressure, certainly look
You
at
know,
it as
we,
a one-day
we
trip at a time.
Yeah, we met one couple that did have a lot of planning in their loop, but they planned it out about music festivals along the way and where they wanted to be to
Yep.
catch the bands.
And
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go along with that
yeah,
attitude.
and it was kind of, well, the music festival goes on for this week, so they kind of had some broad chunks of time that they planned for, and
Yeah,
that worked for them. So,
they made their loop their trip, which is what we encourage everyone to do.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of myths that are kind of about that exact point,
Yeah,
making it your own. But let's take a quick break and we'll just play a message from one of our sponsors. When we come back, we'll pick up with that idea that, there's some myths that cause people to follow the herd, so to speak.
yes.
And maybe we'll work towards busting some of those too. So we'll be back in a moment. Did you know that 50 years ago, the first ever chart kit was born? Chart kits are one of more than 100 chart products from MapTech to help loopers. MapTech's Embassy Cruising Guides and Anchorage books are also a must for loopers. Go to their website, maptech.com, to get started. That's maptech.com. Want more? How about moremaptech.com? It's an interactive website with even more information for loopers. That's moremaptech.com. While you're there, check out MapTech's drone videos. These let you virtually navigate a destination before you get there. Just another aid for loopers, and thanks to MapTech, an AGLCA sponsor. Cross Country Boat Transport has been a family-owned company since 1991. We have 3 drivers with boatloads of experience transporting over-dimension power and sailboats around the lower 48 states. If your perfect looping boat is on the wrong coast, give us a call or send us an email. We'll be happy to discuss transport and answer any questions you may have. Check out our website at crosscountryboat.com, where you can request a quote, view our gallery, and read testimonials from past customers. We're also the go-to for mass transport down to Mobile for our sailing loopers. We're back on the Great Loop Radio podcast. My guests today are Kim and Ted. We are talking about myth busting for the Great Loop, which I love. So we've talked a little bit about some of the planning. We just talked about the fact that you do not have to plan a whole year. One more myth that goes hand in hand with the planning is the idea that you have to shop for a whole year, be prepared, pack the clothes for a whole year. We've had people, and it's so funny, but people who have, showed up at a rendezvous as gold loopers and said, I brought enough paper towels to last me a whole year because I thought I was never going to see a store again, or enough canned goods to last me the whole year. And I think it follows through with clothes, all of the things that you're planning on bringing with you. So
Absolutely.
that is a myth that you really have to plan what to bring along. Tell us how you guys addressed that when you were getting ready to loop, especially because you're in a Ranger tug, so you don't have as much storage space as somebody on a 50-foot
very
boat
true.
might have.
Yeah, we have what we call the cave as another stateroom, and that's storage completely now. But
we have one of those too. I also call it the cave.
Yes.
cave. So first thing is you're packing clothes, and I had heard put them all out and then cut them in half and then cut that in half again, and I did that, and I still ended up having more than I needed, and actually. Solly and Jackie in the previous podcast talk about this too, is that you tend to cycle through the same clothing anyway because it's on top and you see different people every other day and you don't need to, and it's just a more casual lifestyle. So the worrying about clothes, you can let that go because you'll settle in very quickly into a rhythm. But with that said, the other worry is, well, how you're going to be gone for a whole year. What about the different seasons? And we, of course, left in September thinking we're going to chase warmer weather all the way down. And then we had snow in the locks down the Illinois River. And I did
Kim
not,
had snow in the locks. I was inside in the helm.
shaking in the lock, and I was not dressed for it at all.
Mm-hmm.
But that was another thing all along the loop. There are stores, and often not very far. And if you're on the rivers and the marina's a little far from town, they have loaner cars on the rivers typically. You can get the things you need. We went through
You're
3
you're you're you're
Keurigs.
really never more than a day away from getting anything you need.
Yeah, and that
Right.
includes food. We broke 2 Keurigs along the route.
Oh
We
no,
we were
that's
I
my
know,
That
I
nightmare.
have no idea how we did that, but we did. We had one wonderful looper friend of ours, Butch, on Water Dog, had his truck in Alton. He goes, well, here, I hide the keys here
Mhm,
and go ahead and take my truck and go get your Keurig.
mhm.
And then by the time we got around to Fernandina Beach and broke our second one, we learned you could just Amazon order and have it delivered right there to the marina. So
Yeah.
that, the prescription drugs, we've got all of our medicines to 90-day prescriptions. So we really only had 3 refills we had to worry about. And there's usually a Walmart or CVS somewhere close. And,
a little advanced planning.
yeah,
Nothing really
Yeah.
involved.
yeah. That was one thing I didn't mention, but we did read a couple really good books that helped the list of to-dos. And what was it? The Great Loop Experience?
Hmm.
I think that was a good book
By the
with
hospitars, yeah.
lists.
Mhm.
Yeah, with the list of to-dos before you're leaving on the loop. So that really helped. But really all along the loop, you're gonna find the ability to get some things. If you have too many things, you may not know it, but you probably will go home maybe once and you can take stuff home or ship it
Yeah.
home. It's really gonna be okay.
That is super common to be shipping or bringing stuff back home that you thought you would need on the boat and find out it's taking up space that it doesn't
Yes.
need to be.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I love this one because I think this is going to be the hardest one maybe to bust. But the myth is that the locks or tides or currents, kind of fill in the blank, whatever it is that worries you, all of those
Mhm,
things or the Great Lakes are really intimidating.
mhm.
So you say that's a myth. I think I agree at this point. It's a myth.
This,
Um, but if you
It
haven't
is,
done it, you
yes,
can
Tim.
certainly
It's
see why
it's
it's intimidating. But so tell us why you listed that as, a myth that was busted.
well, for me, the idea of the locks coming down the river system, you're in these enormous industrial things, and we're on this tiny little 30-foot boat, and these concrete walls around you, and all of this, and it just seemed like a lot.
I was
And then you
nervous
go
too.
through 2 or 3 of them, and you realize, oh, well, it's not actually a big deal. This is how you talk to the lock masters, and how they talk to you, and what they need you to do,
Mm-hmm.
and you get through it fine.
Mm-hmm.
It was, we mentioned earlier, our home waters from northern Lake Michigan. We don't think anything about the Great Lakes.
Right.
We time our trips, that's for certain.
Mm.
But yeah, okay, if you're going to hit a little bumpy water, you hit a little bumpy water. But
A lot of
we got down into Florida, and where was it? We were on the West Coast.
I know we were, but I forget where.
Anyway,
Yeah. Just
uh,
talking about it.
had not gone far. Maybe we're Tarpon Springs at that. And we're starting to deal with tides. And
Mhm.
okay, this is something new to worry about.
Yeah.
And talking with the dock hand there, and well, we're concerned about this, blah, blah, blah. He says, well, it's nonsense. He looks at our registration. He says, you guys are from Michigan. Guys in Florida are terrified of the Great Lakes.
Yeah.
We're like, why?
Why?
We're terrified of how to figure out the tides here. There's nothing to be worried about. You'll figure it out.
You'll
It's,
figure it out. And that was another Bob Creech
that was something Bob Creech said directly
said.
to me. I'm worried about, I was telling him at one of our rendezvous,
Yeah.
Mhm.
"Oh, I'm a little concerned about dealing with this, dealing with that." He says, you're a bright guy. You'll figure
You'll
it out.
figure it out.
I think all of it,
And
it all falls into the fear of the unknown. And so,
that's, and
you have a lot
that's
of boating
really exactly what it
experience.
is.
Yeah.
And
You just haven't dealt with it before. And once you deal with it a time or two, okay,
Yeah.
now everything's going to be fine.
And
Mhm.
then as you mentioned too, along the way, you realize you've kind of conquered a lot of these things. You may still be the show 1 or 2 times, but I remember, so we're Petoskey, we're up in Cape May.
Yeah.
After the Chesapeake, where it seemed like a lot of people had started together and were waiting out weather in Cape May, New Jersey. And people are asking us for advice. And Ted and I have looked at each other, like, when did we
We
become
we
the
we don't know
experts?
anything. Why are they asking us?
So, but we had done it all. We had crab pots, locks, tide, current, boat was listing one night. We've done Lake Michigan. So by then we had done it all. We didn't feel like experts, but we weren't, petrified anymore. It was all okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I agree. And, it's until you were getting pretty close to coming back to where you started, you haven't done it all until you've conquered the East Coast because of the tides and currents, or conquered the locks, or it's all perspective on where you're
Yeah.
starting from, because
it
you
really is.
described the locks as so intimidating. And I had not been through a lock, but we
Uh-huh.
went south from Charleston for a little while first. Our first locks
Yes.
were the Okeechobee, which are much less intimidating
Yes.
than
Yes.
so. And if your first locks are the Erie Canal, which are much smaller than the industrial locks,
Yeah.
it's all trial by fire. But some of it's
Oh
more
yeah.
intimidating than others, and you can be prepared.
Oh
So
sure. But
I
when
do think
I'm
that
hearing 600 feet long and 100 feet wide, and
400 feet deep.
it's oh, this is so large and my boat is so small.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our first lock was Navy Pier. So what was that, 3 feet?
Yeah, that's a
We
small
were
And
one.
right.
I was white knuckling it to the point my hands hurt when we got through, but I thought, wait a minute, that wasn't bad at all. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So managed.
you manage, and you know what? Those are the challenges that make it an accomplishment. Those are the things that allow us to like check the small successes along the way, because you accomplish
Yes.
something each and every day.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
I always say, it would not be such an adventure or such an accomplishment if it wasn't for the challenges. And thankfully,
Mhm.
most
yeah,
of the challenges that seem like these huge hurdles turn out to be busted, not
yeah,
actually huge hurdles at all.
exactly, exactly.
So this is another one that I love, and it is well, we have to go there because everybody goes there, and there are certainly some looper favorites along the way. But charting your own course is also pretty interesting. So how do you bust the myth that because everybody goes to one particular place that, you must go there?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we recognize there are some stops you just kind of have to make. That's the way the geography works out.
Very
yeah.
true. Hmm.
You know,
Hobbies. We did stop at Bobby's too. That was a good
yes.
stop. So anyway, yeah, some you have to make, but some you don't have to make. And especially get to Florida and there's so many stops, you're gonna miss some. And we went on the outside and skipped Miami and Fort Lauderdale altogether. But
Hmm.
And
about
and
that,
and and that was on the recommendation of dock hands.
Hmm.
yeah.
And that was one of our great sources of information was talk to the dock hands, the dock masters. Where do you guys go to eat? What do you guys like to go
Mhm.
see?
Yeah,
When are the good travel days?
yeah. We
And
went
they're a wealth of information.
I know Marco Island to Everglades City, we went on the inside. We went back in the
In the Everglades back there, yeah.
and that was on the advice of Doc Hands as well, and that was really neat. But we did realize, like, going around Miami and Fort Lauderdale, we also just one night up in New York City, we kind of skipped the bigger cities. We thought we can do these again some other time if we want to stop and see the big cities. We want to see the little places we probably won't go to. And it took going on the loop and learning that about ourselves before we understood. And then things like we missed the Looper Cookout at Delaware City Marina. We missed the Looper Cookout at Shady Harbor. And we're like, oh shoot, we're not going to make it. But schedule just didn't meet up with those
Hmm.
events. But we stopped at Delaware City. We stopped at Shady Harbor and we met the people and we had fun. And it's like, it's okay if we didn't make the cookout. We still had fun at these places if you want to stop there. And so then if you really missed them and you want to go, you have to do a second loop.
There you go. I mean, but you're absolutely right. We're talking about the things that make your loop your own, and same as whether you go the Wisconsin side or the Michigan side. And while you might have missed, those popular events at those two marinas, you were
Mhm.
Yeah,
probably having docktails with a different group that same night anyway. You just happened to be in a
Exactly.
different
true,
place.
true.
Yeah.
And I love earlier you talked about a couple that were looping at the same time as you that kind of planned their stops around music festivals.
Mhm.
Um, and that's something I tell people is whatever your thing is, you can find it on the loop.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
you know,
Yeah.
rather than, and there's nothing wrong with following the pack, so to speak, if they're going where you want to go, but
Yeah.
doing enough research to really know, if your thing is music festivals, where those are and when those are. And the nice thing about the seasonality of the loop and that you're kind of following the warm weather is you're in season
Oh,
in so
sure.
many of the places, and
I
that's when
mean,
all these events are
farmers
happening.
markets,
Exactly.
arts
Farmers market.
festivals. Oh,
Yeah,
so many
yeah,
things to explore along the
yeah.
way.
Yeah, exactly. And then, some of us are super social people, so following the pack is great for them because they really
Yes.
just, thrive on that interaction. So everybody's different, everybody's got to do it their own way. Um,
Mhm.
let's
Yeah,
talk about docktails a little bit.
yeah.
Because one of the myths, and I am asked this question all the time, but there seems to be this
Mhm.
myth out there that you are expected to drink, to consume alcoholic beverages at docktails.
I
Myth or
know.
reality?
Well,
Oh, totally.
we might be the ideal couple to ask that.
Mhm.
I'm in the beer business,
Mhm.
and Kim is a teetotaler.
I, I haven't, I haven't had a drink in quite a few years, although don't feel
Mhm.
bad. I had enough fun in the 10 years I did that, but that, I never drank on the loop, obviously, and never thought 2 seconds about it. I am used to having something in my hand, so I'll take a LaCroix or a sparkling water or whatever in a little koozie or whatever.
Mhm.
No one even says anything, even if you came without a drink or, whatever. The docktails are more about being social with your other looper friends and not at all about what you're drinking or if you're drinking. And I know that some people are still a little nervous about that if they don't drink, but my guess is they're probably nervous about it at home as well, and not
Could
just
be.
boat.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of one of those things like however you are at home, you're probably going to be that way on the loop. But it was very comfortable. But I will say, Ted and I were the most social, more social than we'd been in like 20 years. So,
Yeah,
but
that
we had a
happens, right?
lot of fun.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Docktails were also a wonderful time to talk back and forth. How was the trip today? How'd the boat operate? Hey, I've been hearing this noise on my boat. Are you
Yeah.
familiar with that?
Mhm.
Where have you stopped? Where are you looking forward to stopping?
Mhm.
It's just a social event.
It's
Yeah.
really social.
It's not a drinking event. It's a social
It's a
event.
social event.
Yeah. And I think, the play on cocktails, the play on words that goes with docktails is maybe part of where that comes from, but it
Yeah.
is
Maybe.
absolutely a social event. And I always feel, a little bit not bad, but when somebody asks me this question, because I do get it quite a bit, um, I really I feel bad that they're feeling uncomfortable, that they might not be accepted, because whether it's that you don't drink or whatever else is different about you, quote unquote different, loopers are some of the most accepting people of
Oh,
whatever
absolutely.
that I've
Absolutely.
ever come across. So I think, this is just one of the ways that people who have not yet immersed themselves in the lifestyle
Mhm.
don't know that yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And hopefully they can be put at ease, because honestly, in all the docktails I've been to over the years,
Mhm.
the only, and I think it's happened twice, that anybody asked me what was in my cup. And honestly,
Uh-huh.
I use the same insulated little tumbler. It's right here, in fact. I use
It-
the same one for coffee and wine. Like, it's just my cup. That's what
Yes.
and I have never had anybody at Ducktails, I think twice anybody has asked me what was in the
Mhm.
cup. And it was only because they wanted to offer to refill it for me. That was the
Yeah.
only
That
reason.
is just,
Well,
that's the time when
and
they
Kent,
do it. Yeah.
yeah. I'm in the alcohol business,
Hmm.
So,
and I'll meet people and they're like, "Oh, I'm so embarrassed. I don't drink." That doesn't bother me one bit. I'm not
yeah, that's,
offended by it. I just
Right.
enjoy your company.
Yeah. No, it's
Yeah,
definitely the socialness, not the drinking. So everyone who is concerned about that, certainly keep that in mind.
exactly.
and I,
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
I,
And on the,
I, I do agree with you though, that I feel bad for the people when they do express the anxiety about that. And I do say that, see that more on social media and, I'll chime in and hopefully make them feel better.
Yeah,
It's really going to be okay. It's really about meeting other looper boaters and
yeah.
it's
yeah.
fun time.
It's about being around other boaters, the same people that when you pull into a slip on a windy day
They're going
are
to,
coming over to catch your lines, and
Right.
you have never met them before, and they don't know you.
those are,
It's the same ethos.
yeah.
Right. It exactly is. And on the flip side of that, um, sometimes I wonder when somebody doesn't drink or maybe doesn't drink a lot and they're asking this question, I'm wondering if they think this is like, a huge party atmosphere too.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Very few times have ever I seen loopers, overindulge to the
Yeah.
point of it
I,
being uncomfortable
yeah,
for the rest of
we're
us.
pretty much all past the age of
That's the thing,
fraternity boy addicts.
we
Yeah.
are all past that age for the most part. We are all, Looper midnight is 9 p.m. We are all getting up early to
Okay.
drop the dock lines. So,
Very much
if
so.
that's a concern, it does not usually turn into a raucous affair there at at Docktails. So, but the
Yeah.
other thing about Docktails, and I myself, I love to entertain at home. It's a little bit different on the boat. You've got a
Mhm.
smaller galley.
Oh
You've got
yes.
smaller storage space to keep ingredients and things like that.
True. That's true.
We eat out a lot on the loop, so my galley is often not well stocked. So related to Docktails, a lot of people do bring food.
Mhm.
And if you listen to the podcast with Jackie and Sally, Jackie is a Southern hostess in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
So she brings wonderful snacks. And as she said, you may even leave with a gift if you go to Docktails with a Southerner, and that is Jackie through and through. Um, and I don't want anyone to be intimidated by that idea because you can bring nothing.
You
Yes.
can't
So the
bring
myth is,
yourself.
you need to bring some elaborate spread for
Mhm.
Docktails, and I will say busted. I don't know if you all typically bring food with you to Docktails or not.
We
We have brought bags of pretzels. We've brought charcuterie. We have brought
nothing,
cucumbers with Thai
cucumbers.
gin sprinkled on them,
We do
finger
different things.
foods.
Sometimes nothing, sometimes stuff we
Yeah.
prepare. It's really a mix, but we've never not gone to Docktails because we didn't have food available to bring. And I felt a little bad if people were intimidated by that rule too, and hopefully that's busted because you just bring yourself and meet other loopers. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be an anxiety producing thing unless that's sometimes people are just
Yeah.
like that, but
Well, and
yeah,
and it's not a competition.
it's not,
You
it's
know,
really casual.
nobody's trying to outdo each other with
Mhm.
hors d'oeuvres or anything.
Mhm.
I think one of the best times at Docktails we had somebody at it was coming up the Trent Severn the day before we'd been in
Ah,
Kingston, and somebody had stopped at a wholesale house
and
and bought a
Kingston.
bunch of
I know
fortune
that.
cookies
That was Chris
and
and
handed
Beth on
out fortune
Fontana.
yes, handed out
Fortune
fortune
cookies.
cookies after
Fun.
Docktails,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and we had to go through reading them on the loop when
Mm-hmm.
That was fun. That was a fun thing to bring to Docktails, a fun event and
it was
just
yeah
a laugh.
that was probably the most memorable thing that anybody ever brought to
Yeah.
Docktails was fortune
Yeah.
cookie.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's
I
fun.
know.
And I will say I really appreciate it, all the people that do bring the nice food too, because that's really nice of them too. So it's not to say don't do that either. It's whatever feels good to you.
The people that
Yeah.
have a
Yeah.
special dish they love to share, that's fantastic to discover.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I had
If you're lucky, maybe we'll even share the recipe.
yeah. When we started at the loop, I had kind of a favorite appetizer. And, for me on the boat,
And what
few
was that?
ingredients is key. It was like a little you made them in a mini muffin pan. It was like crescent rolls, and it was
Uh-huh.
filled with like a little piece of brie and some cranberry. Delicious.
Ooh.
That
A
sounds
few
Oh,
of the
wow.
ingredients were perishable, and
Uh-huh.
I threw out the ingredients a few times before I was like, this is not working. And I think one of the things is, Docktails is a thing and it happens a lot, but maybe not as frequently, particularly in certain areas,
Mhm.
yeah.
as it
Yeah.
sounds like it does. So coming up the East Coast,
Yeah.
especially when people are just starting, everybody's kind of on a different pattern. There's a
Yeah.
lot of marinas, people are at different ones. Really
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of when everything narrows down to like the Erie Canal or the
Yeah.
inland rivers is when it tends to happen
You're a little more
Mhm.
more.
concentrated
Um,
together.
So I have since altered the plan to something that is not perishable because I was tired of throwing it out. Thinking, I was going to have docktails every night and I would be going through this stuff regularly, and it
Oh,
was
yes.
not
Oh, yes.
happening. So maybe that's a myth too. Like, I do think, it's a fun time and it's a social time, but it's not something that happens every night. So perhaps you are concerned because you're not a social person and
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
thinking there's an expectation to go to docktails every night.
You
It
know,
doesn't
and,
even
and
happen
also
every
there
night.
are going to be times when docktails, particularly in the fall, say you're coming down the river, nights are short, or excuse me, days are short,
Yeah, true.
and you're tying up, and docktails is really a little more of a captain's meeting than anything
What
else.
time are we meeting
You're
tomorrow?
talking
Good
about the
night.
next thing in the morning.
Yep.
It's been dark for an hour already. You're tired.
Yep.
Yeah.
It takes different forms in different places. Yeah.
Right. So I guess, the bottom line to most of these myths that we are busting is that do it your own way. How would
This
you
is
sum it
true.
up?
Uh-huh. Yeah, and the pictures you see on social media and all of the smiling faces on the selfies at the docktails, it is like that. And like I said, the most social we were in 20 years, but it's not
We
like
met
that all
wonderful
the time.
friends.
We made wonderful friends, went to dinner with, them and had calm nights. We had nights at Anchorage where we cooked simple. Make it your own, and really it's gonna be a wonderful trip. And it's gonna work out. And you'll be the ones they'll be asking for advice by the time you hit the Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah, which will be surprising.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's a perfect way to wrap this up because that is such sage advice. So Kim and Ted, thank you for joining me. It's really been a pleasure to bust all these myths with you.
Kim, it's been good to see you.
Good to see you again.
Well, we'll
Yeah.
see you again soon, I
Thanks for
hope.
inviting us to have further
Yeah,
conversation.
thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you also to everyone who's watched or listened this week. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Great Loop Radio podcast. Until then, safe cruising.